Scientists said countries are like a human's life, who starts as a child, teenager, youth and power, then old age, until specific time, then it dies. Different countries will appear to live all the stages experienced by the former states. Is this the time for the beginning of the end of the American dream and its control over the world? Will the Chinese dragon begin to crawl to break the American monopoly? How China seeks to dominate the world, particularly the third world countries. Will the Arab nations fall into a trap of submission to China? In the Chinese capital, Beijing, the Malaysian Prime Minister said, "We do not want a new version of colonialism," and he also announced that his country cancelled 3 giant projects which Beijing intended to complete. At that time, he emphasized that it was not a matter of funneling big funds, but Kuala Lumpur is unable to reimburse. Anyway, this cancellation was not the first of its kind for the Chinese projects, as the state of Sierra Leone has already done the same. They cancelled a $400 million Chinese supply project to build an airport in the country. The local media in Sierra Leone reported that the Minister of Aviation had said that the President Julius Maada Bio thinks that no need for new airports. The Malaysian Prime Minister and the President Julius were not the only ones who sensed the danger of the Chinese debt trap, and there are also a group of African experts who did the same when warned from the debt trap by granting big loans that would be difficult to repay later. If Beijing continues to do so, then it may begin to influence on the economic and political decision of some countries. China's debt trap policy. Well, we all know that China is moving at a steady pace and in accordance with well-considered principles to become the world's largest empire in competing with the United States of America in order to build a new unstoppable global system in addition to the global economic expansion through which it seeks to launch a massive initiative called the Belt and Road. To achieve its goal, China has spent more than $300 billion on this project and plans to spend $1 trillion in the next 10 years. Although some countries have shown positive reaction to the Chinese debt, believing that it is almost free loans, but the truth is these loans have been economically costly and it's linked to the future of the Chinese companies. One of the first experts to draw attention to the Chinese policy of resource exploitation in the third world by spreading the low-quality goods in the domestic markets in some countries was the professor in the strategic studies field in India, Burhan Shiliani. China is not only doing so, sometimes it sends its own laborers to compete for the local jobs. As a result, these countries have become mired in the Chinese debt, and many countries will get into the debt trap. The strategic location of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is one of the busiest navigation lines between Eastern Asia, the Middle East and Europe, which makes it one of the Chinese ambition. China has given Sri Lanka $8 billion, an interest of 6.3%, which is very high compared to the World Bank, whose interest range from 0.25 to 3%. As a result, China received a share of 85% of the Hambantota strategic port with a 99 years contract plus about 15,000 acres close to the port as an industrial area. Mombasa Harbour in danger. Kenya has become a debt trap victim too, as it was also forced to mortgage its largest port, Mombasa Port, as a result of its accumulated debt. Kenya debts reach more than $5.5 billion, which makes it one of the countries to lose the strategic assets for China. Gwadar Port, Pakistan. Gwadar Port under the Chinese control for about 40 years, with a share of 80% of the total revenue. After ambiguity surrounding some arguments with China, Prime Minister Imran Khan called for transparency in contracts signed with China, which was described as a vague because it included repayment conditions that were in China's interest. Some Chinese companies have also made a huge investment in Pakistan worth about $62 billion in order to construct solar energy plants and renewal of the railway lines and widen the roads and building additional parking slots all around the country. Maldives and Bangladesh. Ibrahim Saleh, after becoming the president, he promised to review all the signed arguments with the Chinese side. He described these arguments as a project to seize the state's land, especially after hiring a Maldives island for about 50 years. In addition to the debts which estimated about $1.3 billion. In Bangladesh, China has captured its most important port, which is Chittagong Port. This came as a result of debts accumulated on the Bangladesh government to reach tens of billions of dollars. Is China dragging Arabs into the same trap? The Sudanese president declared Beijing offer $90 million as loans to support the development projects in Sudan. In Algeria, the Chinese investment in the construction sector is ranked first by $1.2 billion. In Egypt, Cairo and Beijing had signed an agreement worth $18 billion. Djibouti is heavily debted, and most of these debts will go for China. Djibouti may face the possibility that China will hand over some of its assets to repay the debts. Andre Dovenhage, professor at Northwest University, South Africa, says, in the end, China will ask for other forms of repayments, such as ports and lands. So at the end, how many countries do you think will fall into this trap? Comment below and let me know. Thank you for watching.